Hello, I'm Mike Pothier. I'm the Program Manager of the Catholic Parliamentary Liaison Office. Today I'm talking to Bridget Masango, Member of Parliament and the Shadow Minister of Social Development of the Democratic Alliance. Welcome, Ms Masango.
Thank you so much, Mike.
We're going to talk about a number of aspects of social development policy, the social grants, the whole situation relating to the COVID-19 crisis and the relief measures that are being taken, and a few other related topics that come under the general heading of social development policy. Ms Masango, you've been in Parliament since 2014. Can you just give us a brief background? What was your route into Parliament and how did you end up specifically as the DA's Shadow Minister for Social Development?
Well, thanks, Mike, for the opportunity. My route to Parliament was, and into active politics, I might even say, was a very interesting one because let me just say, it was in 2013, towards the end of 2013, when the campaign for the 2014 elections was heating up, when I was approached by the Democratic Alliance in Gauteng to put my name in as a confidential candidate. My work with the Democratic Alliance had started a way long ago, but not actively. I was just helping. I would help with the during elections and translating pamphlets from English to isiZulu, because I come originally from KwaZulu-Natal. And I would help with during elections to fetch people, the elderly, from their old age homes to where they would vote and things like that, but never actively involved. And so when this invitation came in 2013, I then considered it. And I put my name in as a potential confidential candidate. And then, of course, I went through all the processes of being, considered and interviewed and things like that. My entry into Parliament, that process did not succeed to go to Parliament, and that initial process where your name is with the IEC, and then according to the seats that your party gets, then you get to go to Parliament. That one did not succeed. But then I put my name in the hat to be considered for the NCOP as a permanent delegate of Gauteng to the NCOP. And that is what succeeded. And that is why when I started in 2014, I was in the NCOP.
Right. So moving on to the present situation, obviously the crisis that we're going through at the moment has put a lot of pressure on the South African Social Security Agency, SASSA, and on the social grant system in general. And we've seen the introduction of a new grant, a temporary grant called the Social Relief of Distress Grant. Some people call it the 350 Rand grant, which has been made available for about a 6-month period, I think. But there's been a lot of problems with that grant. It was very slow to get off the ground. I believe now that something in the region of 2.5 million people have been paid the 350 Rand at least once. What are your thoughts on the slow start and the problems associated with that grant? And in particular, how would you have done it differently had you been the minister?
Well, I think one needs to locate this whole situation within an environment where the department itself had serious capacity constraints before lockdown and everything like that. And then add to that the fact that when the lockdown started, the offices of SASSA were closed.
Yeah.
So you have an announcement made that there's going to be millions of people that can have access to a social relief of distress grant, but then you close the offices of the very same agency that is responsible to distribute those funds.
Yeah.
So that's where things went totally wrong. And so we have been calling as a representative of the Democratic Alliance in the Social Development Portfolio Committee. I have been calling, I think about 4 or 5 times now, for the opening of the offices of SASSA completely, to be able to respond to the demand that has been brought onto the agency by this social relief of distress, but also people that are just applying for grants because people are locked down, people are not working, even those that were working are now unemployed. So what I would do, as your question rightly asks, I would make sure that I prioritize the protective personal equipment for the offices of SASSA, so that I ensure that people are safe as they offer these services. And then make sure that all the offices that are frontline to offer these services and advice and all these things that need to happen are opened, so that people have access to the offices. Because you know that this was done online. The SRD grant was largely done online. In fact, all of it was done online. But there are people who don't have things like your cell phone, things like your airtime if they have a cell phone, people that do not have access to email, or all these things. So I would have opened the offices to offer this service to people that would otherwise not have access to it, had it not been for the service that SASSA itself, offices themselves would offer. So that is what I would have done.
Right. Linked to the financial relief, the money grant, there was also a plan to distribute food parcels in great numbers. And
right.
It seems that also ran into some problems. I saw a figure quoted this morning saying that 900,000 parcels have been distributed by government. I'm not sure if that's a lot or far too few, but clearly, again, is this also a capacity problem, a planning problem, or indeed has it been a more successful effort, do you think?
Well, the food parcel situation has been another major bungle by the Department of Social Development. And I have not seen the figures you're referring to this morning, but I do know from having attended the meetings of the Social Development Portfolio Committee, Parliamentary one, that the department itself is admitting that this process has been very, very poorly managed, and that the food parcels have not reached many of the people that it should have reached. And so there's an admitting from the side of the department. But over and above that, you would recall that there was a time when the NGOs and the families and the individuals that would have wanted to actually deliver or distribute food parcels to the people in their communities were blocked by the direction, what they called the draft directions by the Minister of Social Development. And that put a huge strain on the people who are hungry, who are poor, accessing food that was ready to be delivered to them by these organizations in support of what the government was trying to do, and epically failed, I might add, in doing it. So you had a situation.
Has that situation been resolved now, where, as you say, at one stage, government tried to sort of take over, or there was a document that suggested government wanted to take over the total distribution of food? Has that been resolved?
Yes, that has been resolved, and it took the Democratic Alliance going to the first the South African Human Rights Commission and later to the courts, and that was resolved because the court, as we want to call it, squashed the draft directions of the minister. So the NGOs were allowed again to distribute food, and everyone who wanted to distribute food could distribute food. And also it was because these draft directions were not facilitating the distribution of food. Instead, it was doing the opposite. It was actually almost blocking it. Right. And this is why we saw it fit to actually take this to court. And of course, that was sorted out.
Now, you mentioned a minute ago reports and information that you've been receiving as a member of the Portfolio Committee on Social Development. That brings me to the question of parliamentary oversight. How difficult has that been, and how successful has that been while you've had to be working remotely and it's these unusual circumstances? Do you feel as a member of the Portfolio Committee that you are able to exercise oversight at this time?
Well, we've used a parliamentary, although virtual, but parliamentary portfolio committee meetings to exercise oversight. I can just mention that 2 meetings ago, I asked the chairperson of the portfolio committee to invite the MECs to join us on virtual platform to present to us how they have fared in distributing food parcels. And that also revealed another situation that is not very positive for the people that have been waiting for food ever since the lockdown started. So that was one way of exercising oversight. But also, although the restrictions on traveling have been quite, strict, but I had to go and especially when the SASSA offices opened, 1/3 of the staff complement was allowed to come back to the offices. I had to go and check a few offices here in Johannesburg, how that was faring in terms of making sure that the services are being rendered. And also with the scourge of GBV, gender-based violence, yeah. I also went to Zanspret to make sure that one is talking to the communities to find out how this has affected them. So it has been, difficult because one also wants to observe the protocols of COVID-19 lockdown, but also one as a public representative is expected to be out there and see how things are going with the communities and the people that one is representing.
Right. So we have this grant, 350 rands a month, which I believe is intended to run until October. And it brings up the question of the basic income grant, or some people call it a universal income grant or an income support grant, or whatever the terminology is. But this is something which has come up to prominence again recently. And again, the government has floated the idea yesterday, I think at a press conference. The minister or the deputy minister was suggesting that perhaps a grant in the region of 500 rand a month or so might be made available to unemployed people who receive no other social security grants. So in general terms, what is the DA's standpoint on a basic income grant?
Well, the DA has always been, even when I was in the 5th Parliament, we were working and proposing to government the situation of ensuring that we look into the people that fall within the 19 to 59 years old category because of the high unemployment rate, because of just the hunger, the poverty that was still gripping the country due to, among other things, the weak economy and things like that. So we are of the opinion that there needs to be some relief for the people that are unemployed in South Africa. But what we have always done, Michael, is that we have always been guided by facts and statistics and the conditions of living of the people as we see them in our day-to-day work life. So For example, we, on the basis of a group in Pietermaritzburg called, I believe, the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, where they are always putting out what they call the food basket. And we proposed, I believe it was in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, we proposed that the child support grant be put a bit higher, because also we need to realize and recognize that the fiscus cannot afford this. But we said at least the child support grant must be at the level of the lower bound poverty line, which is at the moment from 2019 810 rand, because of the food basket getting more and more expensive for communities or for mothers of children to afford to actually feed their children with nutritional food. And that has created a huge situation in South Africa of stunting that has been estimated in the recent past at 27%. So we are off the fact that there has to be a grant that takes care of the category of the South African population that is not catered for by any government social services, a social net, if you may call it that way.
One of the big debates about a basic income grant is whether you target it as a normal social grant at a particular class of people, say unemployed between this and this age, or whether you make it an entirely universal grant for ease of administration, simply everybody gets it, and then you recover it from those through the tax system, for example, from those who don't need it. So from what you're saying, if I understand correctly, the DA would favor the first option, that it would be a grant targeted specifically at indigent people who have no other source of income and who at the moment are not receiving any of the existing grants. Is that correct?
That's correct, because we also believe that you would do that alongside making sure that the economy recovers and that people will come out of the grant. And we have been shown by the statistics that I believe it was the University of Stellenbosch that produced a research a report that said that the people who are receiving the child support grant are actually very actively looking for jobs. So we want a situation where people will get into the grant, and when their situation changes, then they can get out and find employment or a small business or whatever. So it's not that the grant is going to be targeted at people that need it, and with the thought that those people may not need it forever, because we would actually, as a government, in this case, we would be making sure that the economy recovers, the opportunities are there for people to get employed, the opportunities are there for people to start small businesses and then get out of the system. Because it has shown us, although it is not a big enough research to show this, but it has shown us that South Africans want to work. They are looking for work. It's just that the economy is not conducive at the moment for them to secure employment.
Moving to another pandemic, the president has termed it a pandemic, and I think we all know just how serious it is, and that is the problem of gender-based violence and connected to that violence against children. And we've seen some of the usual very horrific incidents in the last few weeks and months. Some people argue that the lockdown has perhaps exacerbated the situation. But just again, to start off in general terms, it's obviously a very complex question and a multifaceted question. What would the DA do if you were in government? How would you go about trying to tackle this problem?
Well, Mike, I'm very glad that you are saying that it is a very multifaceted problem, and it is a problem that invites all of society to work on. We have been actually saying that the infrastructure in communities where you have this pandemic getting rife all the time. We need to have a situation where South African police service is properly capacitated. It is properly trained. It is properly, given all the tools that it needs to respond to this. But that is after the situation has happened, I guess. It would be when a victim comes to the police station that we are saying the police must be trained to address this. But we are saying it's also a social problem. We have been, as the DA, saying that the ills, the social ills in South Africa are in such a way that you need to have social services practitioners. The government has trained no less than 4,000, let me say 6,000 social workers, and at the expense of the taxpayer. And most of those social workers are sitting at home, and they could be deployed in communities to deal with the social ills that are brought about by, among other things, and this is no way an exhaustive position I'm taking, but there are people that are unemployed, young people that are unemployed, many of them, and they have nothing else to do in communities. So you have social ills here that are there in communities. You need social workers so that this would work towards preventing these incidents from happening. But then when they do happen, the SAPS, then the SANDF and whoever else can come in. So I'm saying the SAPS has got its place in community, but let's work on prevention before this thing happens. And so it is a multifaceted, it is an intersectoral sort of situation that needs all of society, both government, the NGOs that work in this sector, and the communities themselves.
The SAPS and the SANDF you mentioned a minute ago. Now here in Cape Town, as you know, for quite a while, I think it's going on for perhaps nearly a year, we've had the army deployed in certain parts of the Cape Flats, originally as a way of trying to combat gangsterism and associated violence. And then during the lockdown also, we know that the army has been deployed in various parts to help enforce the lockdown. Do you have a sense whether this increased presence of law and order, if we can put it that way, on the streets of the country has had any positive effect, even side effect, on the gender-based violence question? Or is it a different kind of policing altogether?
I think it's, and this is, I think it's a personal thing, to say that for me, this over deployment of the SANDF, it brings fear. So you are safe, but you are in fear because of its presence. So I am saying we need, as I was saying earlier, we need the deployment of properly trained community, sort of community-based peace officers, if I can call it that, where these are the people that are working with communities. These are the people that are not descending on communities and causing fear and because also we have heard that the scourge of gender-based violence has actually escalated during lockdown, and we are hearing of situations where people go to police stations to report these things, and they are treated with so much disdain that they actually are now experiencing trauma for the second time. So I believe that if we must have, and I'm not saying that we don't need it, but if we must have it, it must be in such a way that it is repurposed for purposes of being in communities and working well with communities and taking away fear from communities while it is making people safe. That would be my attempt to actually answer that question, because it is a huge issue, and it has created so much damage in communities and in specific lives of women and children. And just one says, there has to be something that can be done.
Hmm. I wonder what your views are on the question of patriarchy as a causative or contributing factor, and in particular, the suggestion that, again, is coming to the fore more and more these days, that the faith community must take some responsibility, because in many of our churches and faith organizations, patriarchy and patriarchal attitudes tend to be promoted. Do you have any view on that?
Well, Mike, I believe that the faith community has a huge role to play in dealing with the ills, the social ills of society as a whole. And also, I have to admit that if you take it in a way that many people take it to say that patriarchy, because of the issues of the priests only being men and not women and things like that, I am saying the role is big for the faith community in terms of what the church or what the faith instills on people. So for me, it is what they can learn from it, as opposed to who is holding what position, as it were. Because I am a very well, I would like to believe I'm very deeply in faith, and so it has helped me to deal with issues. So I'm saying what I have gained from it, other people can as well, which is why I believe that the church or the faith community has a huge role to play in this. And yes, the patriarchy in this country, especially, or in the countries of the world, I've been to many countries where people are saying patriarchy is just an issue that needs to be tackled, and it has been an issue for over the years. But yes, patriarchy is there, and patriarchy is not helping in situations where the gender-based violence is being experienced at the moment. And also, it's not helping in ensuring that the younger people that are growing up are learning the things that they shouldn't be learning from what is happening with gender-based violence at the moment. So I'm saying the church must, the faith communities must stand up and take its role in society to try and deal with this issue of first patriarchy, and secondly of gender-based violence.
Moving on to the last topic that I wanted to chat to you about, the question of social cohesion. Now, to state the obvious, we come from a very divided past, and much of the post-1994 project in the country has been about trying to move from divisions to a greater social cohesion and some sort of national unity. Do you feel that, we're making real progress in that regard? Are we finding a common humanity in some way? Or are we still very enslaved to the things that divide us?
Right. I think that there was a time when there were gains from the post-1994 project, if I may call it that. But then I think over the years, that is being sort of undone in ways that are so sad and are so actually counterproductive for the social cohesion of the country. And I believe it's for that reason that the Democratic Alliance it has the principles that it has, which are we are of the belief that the way that the country must be run, or that people must live together, we are saying that there needs to be an open society for all, that all people, the constitution of this country says that South Africa is for all, it belongs to all that live in it. Yeah. And we are saying, tagging on that, you will find that after post-1994, there is still today more that unites us than what divides us. But then you have incidents where people are going back to what divides us, and there is no way that you can take something that created so much damage in the past and hope to use it going forward. So I'm totally against the situation where any category is being used to divide the people of South Africa, whether it is race, whether it is gender, whether it's any social sort of demographic that is being used. It cannot help South Africa go forward. We have so much that unites us than what divides us, and that we can use to go forward. And that is not saying by any means that we need to ignore the damage that the pre-1994 dealt the people, many people of this country. All it is saying is that let's redress that, but let us use the diversity as some kind of a uniting thing, that we are working together. We open all sectors of society, economy, government, everything else. Let's open it for all the people of this country, whilst redressing what it is that the pre-1994 government did to the many people of this country.
That's a very positive note on which to end, I think. So I'm going to say thank you very much, and I hope that we will have an opportunity again in the future.
Thank you so much, Michael. I really thank CPLO for this opportunity, and I hope that it helps in any way. And I would definitely welcome another invitation, should you so wish.
Thank you.
Thank you.